Okay, so I'm here to do my darts. So I'm actually doing my darts so that they're going to be on the outside of my pants. So it's a little easier to kind of get them a little more accurately if you're actually pinning through. So you can see I've put my pin through each leg of the dart, and then I can kind of fold it and get it to fold in half. Otherwise, it's very hard to get your dart, especially if you've only got a narrow. Mine are only 3/8 of an inch total in width, so not really that wide to be trying to get the way I want it. So I'm just gonna stitch down here, and I am keeping my eye on at the front of my presser foot where my stitching line is, and I'm just going to take and put my pin through the bottom. Yeah, I've actually got it even, so if I stay pretty close to this stitching line, I should be good. When I get down to the bottom here, I want to make sure that I come off of the fabric at the end of the dart, just catching one or two threads. So, okay, so, and like I said, I'm not going to, there's my back there. I'm a little wiggly, but I think because my darts may change or what have you, I think that's pretty good for me for this. I'm happy with that. I'm not gonna worry about it. Okay, so now I'm going to do my leg seams. So I'm taking and I'm lining up my colored or my marked side at the hem. And if you don't have a fabric you can see through, you will want a pin. And what I suggest you do is sort of put your pin in and then have a peek on the inside that you've caught it before you put your second side of your pin in. And I don't think I've got the right pieces here. No, I don't, because my seam allowances are different. So that leg belongs for the other one. Let's see, what have I got here? I have a back, so I do need a front. You want to make sure that you are sewing a left and a right leg. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to have two legs the same. So just kind of manipulating this here so I've got everything lined up, and I'm actually sort of using my window as a bit of a light box for me so I can have a bit better look through it and catch my stitching line. So I'm just going to take a peek inside. It looks like I'm good. So if I cut everything out as I should have a 1-inch seam allowance coming off the side. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom, and you can reverse a couple of stitches simply because if you pull at all on this, you may find that the stitches start popping out. So we want to have it a little more secure. So I'm able to see through this. Like I say, you may not be able to see through yours, and that's perfectly fine. When you stitch up your seam, if you take a look at the right side and you find that you're really quite a bit off, then you're going to want to adjust that. Make sure that you have that stitching line proper. Other thing, you know, if you really find it difficult to get this stitched on the proper line, is you can sew it with the stitching out. And then what I would suggest you do is you'll have to, when you flip it over, you're going to have to somehow mark your horizontal lines, especially your thigh, your knee, your high hip, and your low hip. Those lines you want to make sure, and your crotch line, because it's going to be different back and front. You want to be able to see those lines when we're fitting, okay? Otherwise, you're trying this on inside out, which is probably not something you can't do as well if it's easier. So now that I've said all this, it kind of is going to be whatever works the best for you. Because the idea is you want to be able to have this stitching as close to the stitching line, because that is the line from your pattern draft. That's where all of your drafting marks came to. So you really want to be on that line, otherwise your pattern is going to be off by a bit. Now, I'm also not pinning this. That doesn't mean you have to stitch this up without pinning, because again, that may be something that you just are finding a little bit too difficult. So pin away whatever you need, put as many pins in as you need, and if you need to go over it a little bit. Okay, so here I am, moment of truth on this seam. So as I pull this out, actually that's my low hip, there's my high hip. You can see I'm probably off by a 1/16. Not going to worry about that. Crotch line is going to be different from the back and the front. The back is always going to be a little bit lower. My thigh pretty good. My knee off by a tad, and my calf is right. Okay, so now I'm going to continue in the same method as I've been doing, going from the bottom of the pant leg up to the top. So I'm going to do my other 3 seams, the other one, the inseam on this leg, and then the out and the inseam on the other leg, and then we're going to put the crotch together. So I'm just doing my last inseam here, and remember the inseam, unless you chose to, my outseam was 1 inch seam allowance, my inseam is only 5/8. So, and in some areas it's a rather wide 5/8, so that's why it's always good to have a bit of a stitching line. So another way, if you're having trouble with pinning, is if you kind of flip the 2 back and then just kind of line them up, take that small area and sew it. So you got a couple of inches there. Stop, make sure your needle's in the down position, and just kind of walk your seams together. Do a couple of inches. Same thing. You can even see how close you are to matching your horizontal lines. Like I say, if you don't match them all, that's all right. It's just, probably just your line was a little bit wider. Now when you get to the crotch point here, you just want to make sure that they match. You may, the back may be a tiny bit longer, but this has got a bit of a curve to it, so there's a bit of a bias stretch on it. So you want to match those points. So I'm pulling them together to match them, and this is where it's probably easier if you don't have pins, because I can now sort of stretch and ease that one seam right into the other. Okay. Okay. So now I've got my 2 legs together. So I'm going to sew this crotch seam. Now take a look at yours before you go to sew it. It should, where the inseam is, there should be a fairly straight area. If you've got too much of a peak in there, then before you go ahead with this, you may want to redraw that line. What you'll have to do is maybe put the 2 legs together at the inseam, and for bulk reasons I would bring one inseam towards the front and one towards the back. Line up your seam, just put a pin in there, and not a straight pin but a sewing needle. So just put a pin in here, and then maybe you may have to sort of trim a little bit of that off, okay, so that you've still got a nice straight line here. So you should be sewing now for this crotch seam. You should actually be sewing your 2 center fronts together and your 2 center backs. So I am going to, because I actually didn't leave anything at the side open, I'm going to sew mine up. I think I'm going to actually open up my side a little, one on my right side, so that when I can get into these. Otherwise, if you don't have an opening here at the top, you're not gonna be able to get into them, because there's no stretch, and your waist is probably considerably smaller than your hips. So I'll have to go back in and remove a little bit of stitching from the side, just so I can get into them. Some methods will have you put an actual zipper in, and you can do that if you're really struggling with fit and holding it, getting them in the right position. But I don't think you should have to do that, but certainly is something that if you feel you'll achieve a better fit, you can just put like a slotted or a center zipper in. I would say either center front or center back, and that way you can sort of get in and out of them a little easier, and that they will stay up. Just remember, with doing that though, you can't adjust that seam without taking the zipper out. So it's unless you do, well, even the side, you still can't adjust it. So that's why, like I say, unless you really need to put a zipper in, I would avoid that, at least for this muslin. When you maybe get to when you're doing your first draft of pants off of your pattern, you can put a zipper in if you need to be sure that you've got it and there's no other tweaks. The first muslin you make is not going to be a perfect fit, and you may not get a perfect fit for a couple of drafts. So I would suggest that once you've got this muslin pretty good and you're happy enough with it, that you cut out a pair of pants. Make them fairly simple, whether you put a fly front in or an invisible zipper, or if you decide you're going to put side pockets. Just make them fairly simple so that you can still make a few adjustments to them, and maybe change your draft up just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to turn these right side out so that I am sure that I've got the right side that I'm taking some of the seam out of. So I've got these here, and center front is here. So that means this is going to be my right side. Okay, so I'm just going to go down. I don't really have to go all the way down to my low hip. I can kind of go halfway in the middle, and that's because my high hip is about the same in width as my low hip, if not a slight bit larger. So I don't have to go down to all the way down to my hip to get these pants on me. I can actually get a little bit, get them up a little bit higher. Okay, so I've got these ready, and so I will get myself in them, and it will be the moment of truth. I can already see, if you look at these, you see how they're kind of coming up at the back. We're going to see whether that's an actual problem, or if that's okay. Otherwise I would say I would straighten that line out just a little bit. Anyway, fitting will tell.